Welcome back to our series on the book of Enoch. Today we'll deal with 1 Enoch chapter 8. I'll read the text, which is fairly brief, and then we'll comment in some detail. Asael taught men to make swords of iron and weapons and shields and breastplates and every instrument of war. He showed them metals of the earth and how they should work gold to fashion it suitably, and concerning silver to fashion it for bracelets and ornaments for women. And he showed them concerning antimony and eye paint and all manner of precious stones and dyes. And the sons of men made for themselves and for their daughters, and they transgressed and led the holy ones astray. And there was much godlessness on the earth, and they made their ways desolate. Shemahazah taught spells and the cutting of roots. Hermani taught sorcery and for the loosing of spells and magic and skills. Barachel taught the signs of the lightning flashes. Kokabel taught the signs of the stars. Zekel taught the signs of the shooting stars. Arkatoph taught the signs of the earth. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Sahriel taught the signs of the moon. And they all began to reveal mysteries to their wives and to their children. And as men were perishing, their cry went up to heaven. This is a very disturbing picture where you have the watchers who are bringing down to the earth forbidden knowledge, which should not have been given to the sons and daughters of men. And they are spreading this to their families. And you know what the old saying, people talk. This knowledge is going out into all the earth, and it's changing history. It's changing the way people relate to each other. It's changing the way people act. And we'll deal with this in a little bit of detail. Shemahazah taught them the spells and the cutting of roots. Now, this is probably a reference to what's called Pharmacia in the Greek. Pharmacia refers to the use of incantations and materials from the earth in order to make medicines and potions. This word occurs in the Bible, and it's almost always translated as sorcery or witchcraft, in both the Old and the New Testaments. And this was taught. And so what you have here is possibly the beginning of what we now would call natural medicine or plant-based medicine, but it was usually combined with incantations and other things like this, so that it almost amounts to a witchcraft type of situation, which is very detrimental and lays the groundwork for what we would later on call sorcerers or people who practice witchcraft and the occult. Now, by number, we have 6 mentions: the signs of the earth, the signs of the sun, the signs of the moon, the signs of the stars, the signs of shooting stars, and the signs of lightning flashes. This is very clearly the beginnings of astrology. 6 of them taught how to look into the sky and how to interpret what Jesus called the signs of the times. This has been going on since the beginning of human history. And this is where it starts. Signs of the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, the shooting stars, and lightning flashes. Now, it's not to say that before this time, people didn't look up in the sky and wonder what was going on and try to make sense out of things. We're talking about very early in human history. But what the watchers did was they trained and taught their families, who taught others. This gets passed around very quickly. Here is how you either figure out what's going to happen. Here's how you figure out what current situations mean, what things that you're seeing that are going on every day. You look up at the skies and I'll teach you how to interpret it and even to predict the future. How to get answers from the skies, how to get answers from the stars. All of this astrological situation is coming from this root here, with the 6 watchers who brought the signs of the heavens and taught people how to make sense of it, how to use it, and how to move in a direction that we would today call astrology. Hermione taught sorcery for the loosing of spells and magic and skill. Right here, you're talking about incantations, you're talking about breaking curses, you're talking about using the powers of the spiritual world to get things you want and to keep away things that you don't want. This is the early foundation of witchcraft, and it was laid by the Watchers, by this one Watcher, Hermione. Asael taught the men to make swords of iron and weapons and shields and breastplates and instruments of war. This is where you get a lot of the trouble that we see in the world, because once you start learning how to do what we now call metallurgy, how to find metal, understand what it can do, to mine it out of the ground, to form it, to shape it into items like weapons. Weapons changed the face of history. Again, it's not that there were no weapons before this, but you had, wooden arrows and clubs and things like this. Once you start bringing metallurgy into the situation, now you have swords and knives made out of metal, where before knives may have been made out of jagged rock, stuff like that. Now you have shaped and formed metal swords, metal knives, reinforced shields, pieces of armor and helmets. Making weapons lets one person or one group of people impose their will on others, subjugating individuals, communities, or entire nations by force of arms. This all comes at a large and powerful scale from metallurgy, which was taught by the Watchers. It allows people to subjugate others, to accumulate power and wealth by force, wage war, and leading to very cruel injustices. And this is dealt with later on in the book of Enoch, that the rich and powerful, by virtue of the weapons that they have and their power, are imposing their will on others and leading to, later on, persecutions and all sorts of other tragedies that come from war and oppression. The impetus for this came from the Watchers. Put it what we would now call on an industrial scale. Sure, you had blacksmiths and people who made things out of metal and so forth. Now you have this happening and on a broader scale. Now it's interesting that in ancient times, and even in many places in the world, people who form metal, people who are blacksmiths, people who engage in metallurgy and shaping and making things out of metal, are oftentimes regarded as having demons or representing forces of evil. And in their cultures to this day in the world, where let's say you have Bill over here, and he's a blacksmith. He makes things out of metal. He repairs weapons and everything. There are people, you would not let your daughters marry his sons, because that family is coming from a heritage that is harmful and detrimental. This heritage of metallurgy, forming weapons and so forth, brought a lot of evil and tragedy into the earth. And there are cultures today that remember that. They may not know the story of Enoch, but this situation in certain Asian cultures is still remembered very clearly, and it survives. The other thing that you see with metallurgy is it allows you to fashion idols, which of course we all know that leads to nothing good. And the other thing is eye paint. If you look in the Bible, you'll see eye paint. Jezebel painted her face, painted her eyes. She wanted to look good when Jehu came to see her. Eye paint in the ancient world was very widely practiced, and early cosmetics and eye paint were usually made from metals and minerals mined from out of the ground. And used in the wrong way, this can enable and amplify and magnify things like seduction, ostentation, and all sorts of evil. It's not to say that makeup is a bad thing or that, making yourself look nice, oh, that's evil, we can't have that. But in the ancient world, this began to be something that was abused. Again, metallurgy in itself can be used for good, but it's often used for evil and harmful purposes. The same with eye paint and things like it. You often see it used for seductive purposes, ostentatious purposes, and the like. This is something that Enoch understands and is telling us. So what you have here is Pharmacia, the beginnings of what you might call sorcery and witchcraft with medicine, witch doctors you might call it, astrology, metallurgy, where the metallurgy is being used for bad purposes, and this knowledge was being showed around and told by the watchers to their families, and it was spread around very widely to humanity, and much tragedy came as a result. And humanity was perishing and cried out to heaven, "Where is God? This is awful. What's going on? We need God to help us." And that's the conclusion of chapter 8 of 1st Enoch. We're going to keep going in the book of Watchers, which is the early chapters of Enoch, and we're glad that we're with us. We bless you in the name of the Lord and hope to see you again soon. Bye now.